7 p.m. on September the 28th, and we are in a special session. The regular session agenda item 1, consider and take appropriate action regarding a final plat of Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Wastewater Treatment Facility, Trophy Club, Texas, including consideration and action on related waivers to the town subdividers regulations as requested by the applicant. Ron, did you want to report on anything or say anything to us?
I don't really have much to say other than you obviously heard the commission's motion earlier recommending approval of the final plat. And really, staff is recommending approval as well. It does meet all the ordinance requirements in the Code of Ordinances. The only discrepancy, as it were, is that it doesn't exactly match the preliminary plat as approved with conditions by the town council, but it does match what council, the direction council provided at the last meeting when we discussed this item. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
And just so that we're all clear, the action taken by Zoning Board of Adjustments granted them what?
The zoning board granted a variance to the front setback requirement in its entirety, so there is no more front setback requirement. The plat reflects that. There's no front setback shown on the plat, so it is now in compliance with that. They also granted a special exception to allow the material of chain link and barbed wire to remain on the perimeter fence around the plant site. They granted a special exception to the screening wall requirement on the northernmost portion of the property where it is adjacent to Canterbury Hills Phase 3, where there'd be 2 residential lots that back up in that area. And then finally, they granted a special exception to allow the fence to be built beyond the front building line, basically where it exists now, along the southern property line, with the only exception that if the fence was to ever be relocated, it would need to be brought up to current code. In other words, it's the special exception was only granted for the fence to be in that location. All right,
good. Council, any discussion that you have at this point?
I do have a minor question of Ron. In the planning and zoning meeting that just occurred, Commissioner Oldham pointed out an issue on the plat, and she asked a question about it and recommended a change. But when they made the motion was to approve the plat as they saw it. Can you explain to everyone what that was and whether or not you think, is that something we should take up here?
What it was is basically language on the owner's dedication certificate, and it was she pointed it out to me after the meeting just to make sure I understood what it was, and it's a very, very minor. So it's kind of basically when a plat gets approved, and feel free, the town attorney can chime in if she needs to, but when a plat is approved, any change that needs to be made before it gets filed that would fall under the guise of an amended plat doesn't need to come back to the board because that's an administrative authority anyway. But if it falls under a replat requirement, which is a legislative action, then it would need to come back. And in this case, it would fall under the scope of an amended plat.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions, council?
I would just like to know, before we do make a motion, approve anything, if the applicant has any questions with the plat. Any other issues remaining?
Jennifer's shaking her head no.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess you'd have to state that.
And I don't see anybody shaking their head yes, so I don't guess there's any more.
All
right, I would entertain a motion then.
Based on the fact there's no additional commentary, I'll make a motion that we approve the final plat of Block 1, Block A, Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1 Wastewater Treatment Plant Facility as submitted and approved by the Planning Department.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Perro, a second by Councilmember Rowe. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor, show your hands. All opposed, same sign. No opposed. It is unanimous. Item number 2, conduct a hearing as requested by the Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1 to consider its request for waivers to various provisions of town subdivision regulations applicable to the development of the wastewater treatment plant, request dated September 4th, 2015. Council to consider and take appropriate action regarding same, discussion and direction regarding site plan requirements for the development of the wastewater treatment plant. At this time, I'll either go with staff comments or the applicant making some comments. Who would like to be first?
I would recommend that the applicant come up and make comments.
All right, so if the applicant would like to make some statements.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Adam Marsh with CP&Y Inc., representing the Municipal Utility District. We do not have a presentation for this item specifically, but if you could turn into your packet to the letter dated September 4th that was sent to Patricia Adams, Town Attorney. I can just run through it real quick, and then we're here. Myself with the General Manager, Jennifer McKnight, or Kevin Glover would be happy to answer any questions you might have. On the letter, if you can see number 1, there was the application of subdivision rules. This really, we wanted to clarify that we weren't doubling the size of the facility, and so I don't think there's really anything left on number 1, as things have obviously occurred since we sent this on November 4th. Number 2, road construction and perimeter street fees. We are, at the MUD, we're asking that we be allowed to place the required fee into the towns, basically pay our perimeter street fee now as the code allows. The code says that we can pay our half of the road now, and it's held in basically held in escrow for 20 years, at which point, if it's not used, it is returned to us. And again, that's that is laid out in the code, that is what's to be done if it's deemed that the road can't be built or shouldn't be built at the time of the plat. So we're just asking that that be allowed. There was some conversations previously that we not do that, and then that we pay our half when the road comes. And again, we're just asking that the code be upheld here and we be allowed to do what the code is asking. And then number 3 is the requirement for developers agreement. And we just really want a clarification from staff and or the council that the code says it requires a developer's agreement if public improvements are being built. And at this time, given our plat and our site plan, which you have not seen, we know is coming forth, we don't believe we're not proposing any public improvements to be built at this time. So it seems that the requirement of a developer's agreement would not pertain to our site and our plans to move forward. So that was really the spirit of the letter, seeking some clarifications, and we're happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Adam. So, council, or, excuse me, Ron, did you want to say something after that?
Regarding the developer's agreement, I would agree with them in terms of there are no public improvements, therefore a subdivider's agreement as defined in the subdivision regs is not necessarily required in this case, because the subdivision regulations say that it has to be approved at the same time as the final plat. However, what I would recommend, and the council can just provide some direction on this to maybe be with final approval when the site plan comes before you, is that there be approval of a right-of-way encroachment and joint use agreement to allow the improvements that will be built within the new right-of-way, which is obviously approved on the final plat, to basically put that in some type of arrangement to where it allows that to remain until such time the road is built in the future. It protects both the applicant and the town in terms of their investment and also any future investment by the town in building the roadway.
All right, thank you. So just to clarify for me, any requirement for parking on the plat, which would include area outside of the fence of the wastewater treatment plant, but in the plat, would be something dealt with at site plan?
Yes, sir.
And any fencing would be dealt with at that point if there was something to deal with.
That is correct. If it falls under that scope, yes, sir.
Right, okay. And so, just for the record, I'll state my opinion is I don't think putting up the money for the road is the best use of your funds. It seems like to me that if we're going to have some type of right-of-way encroachment agreement, that it could specify some things in that agreement, and then you don't have to put up the cash. That's me personally about that. So any other council want to make some statements or questions about any of these items at this point? Rylan?
Okay, just to piggyback on what Ron said earlier about an encroachment agreement relative to the right-of-way, it's almost to a T what the motion that this council approved on August 11th that granted waivers within the right-of-way for. Remember Garrett's motion that was like 3 paragraphs long? So I would say that means that, from my standpoint, Ron's recommendation sounds like a sensible one. And I think what I heard from the mayor just now indicates that that's something that we may work through in the future. So I don't know if we need to simply nod our heads in agreement, or we're supposed to move to take action on that. But I would support what Ron mentioned on that aspect of it.
What? Go ahead, Garrett.
I just had a question real quick. What's the amount of monies that this fee, do you have an idea of what?
We have an estimate, I believe.
Oh, yeah, what's
Adam?
the estimate?
We have an estimate, but it's supposed to be dictated. I mean, we think it's in the neighborhood of 150,000.
Okay, so it's significant amounts
But
of money.
it is not, that's not for us to decide.
Gotcha. I just was, I guess I had a question. So I'd be in favor of what Nick said. At the end of the day, it sounds to me like this money is going to sit, Stephen, you can tell me, in an escrow account. Town can't use it. MUD can't use it. It's money that's just going to sit for 20 years. So I would rather the MUD keep that money.
So
They probably have better things to do with it.
I think because the regulations call for them to do that. Is that right, Ron? Pay this perimeter fee up front?
That was my other question. Does it require that be done, or does it give us the option to?
The regulations say that if the developer is not going to actually construct the improvements, that they pay the perimeter street fee instead. In this case, in the preliminary plat motion, when you approve that you gave them the option to defer that payment until a later date. If you wanted to clarify that further tonight, if you're talking about waiving it altogether, or just reaffirming what you did with the preliminary plat motion, you can do that tonight.
Well, I'm talking about deferment. Would
Okay.
be my preference.
Yeah,
And
that
should
that
we-
would just be a clarification or a
Clarification.
verification of
which
what you
could
already
be
did with
part
the
of a motion
preliminary
if we
plat.
wanted to do so.
It would actually would have to be a part of the motion, because it would be a waiver to the subdivision regulations, because it gives you 2 choices: build the street or pay the fee. So it would need to be a motion for the waiver.
Tim?
They want to make sure that they're paying today's dollars at today's prices, and so in the motion, we have to make sure that that's what we're talking about. We're going to go round and round.
That would be appropriate to do so,
Okay.
I would think. So that we agree upon some dollar amount. Right now, it's an estimate.
Right.
And can document that in a written instrument to at least make it simple and everybody understands it for the future. Now, do we, Patricia, do we have to do anything to, any more than a, do we have to take action to say that we're not going to require a developer's agreement?
Well, we need to address the items in the waiver request, and my understanding is that the first one is really moot at this point, so there's no action to be taken on that one. The second one is, of course, what y'all have just been talking about, and the third one, you'll need to take action on as well, because they are waiver items before the council.
Okay. All right, and so, council, let's deal with the second one, the road construction perimeter fees. Motion might be in order that we instruct staff to come up with a more appropriate estimated cost, and that figure be documented in a right-of-way encroachment agreement to be developed outside of this meeting. Anybody want to move something? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
We're slow tonight.
Sorry, I was just thinking about what I would say. Yeah, I'll
That's
make.
the reason I was stumbling around a little bit.
Well, me too. I was right there with you. I'll make a motion to direct staff or direct the town manager to have staff prepare right-of-way encroachment agreement, as discussed by Ron Ruthven earlier, to include an estimate for a perimeter fee payment to be paid after a deferral of some point and condition to be expressed in the agreement.
And you're referring to that no money's required until said time that a road would be.
If assuming that's the condition, yeah, I
If
figured.
and when.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion by Rowe and a second by Reed. Let's make sure that we're clear on that. We're instructing the town manager to have prepared a right-of-way encroachment agreement that does any of the areas that are recommended by staff to document, including documenting the fact that an estimated amount will be obtained for the future road if it ever happened, and that would be placed in the agreement so it would not go over that amount that they would pay. Does that seem to be reasonable to the applicant? Anybody wants to say anything as opposed to nod ahead?
I think all we can do tonight is take this back to the board. And I think at this point, when this letter was sent, the board preferred to pay the perimeter street fees. But I think the issue was the concern of today's dollars versus 30 years from now's dollars. So all I can tell you is I'll be happy to take this back to them.
So it's understandable we're trying to say we'd put down in writing what today's dollars would be,
Yes.
therefore not requiring the payment at this time, and protecting the board from potential increase in prices, assuming the road ever got built. Does that make clear? That's what I'm assuming we're doing. Is that right, council? Everybody on board with that?
Yes, sir.
And to clarify, that fee will be established by the town engineer per our regulations.
That's right. And that won't happen immediately. But, okay, we understand that.
And let me ask this, typically, if they were to make the payment, we were told at one time that that would sit in escrow for 20 years, and then we would have to return it if we didn't build within that 20 years. So I think that, you know, when Jennifer says 30, I think it should just be in that agreement, whatever, if they paid today. So if it's just 20 years that we could keep it, we have to return it.
And it drops
then-
dead after 20.
Yeah, then I think the agreement should mirror that, not go on indefinitely forever.
I
Yeah,
think
that-
that's what I kind of understood about things.
Yeah, maybe
Be
let's
required.
make it perfectly clear. This is the intent of this is not to hold cash hostage. We don't want to do that. That would be pointless. So I think that the idea is that the relative to what it states in the code, the money would be the same.
Right.
It's just that the method would be more advantageous to not tying up capital somewhere. Hopefully everyone's clear on that.
All right, are we clear? Motion was probably a little bit vague, but
I think that's
we tried.
fair.
All right. Okay, all in favor, show your hands. All opposed, same sign. It is unanimous. All right, the third item to deal with tonight, council, is developers agreement, where they were asking for a waiver to not do a developer agreement. You have heard from staff that that seems to be okay, but would recommend a right-of-way encroachment agreement. You took action in the previous step to actually develop a right-of-way encroachment agreement, but I'm understanding from Patricia that we need to have a motion that says we don't require a developer's agreement, we're doing this. Is that right, Patricia?
Yes. Yes.
Specific motion.
I'll make a motion that we not require a developer's agreement, but instead use the right-of-way and joint encroachment agreement that we just discussed and approved under item 2.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion by Perro, a second by Kurtz, to waive the requirement for a developer's agreement, but do have staff develop the right-of-way encroachment agreement as talked about earlier in the previous document. Any discussion?
Yeah, just a quick question. So all of this will come to us before site plan to approve?
The encroachment agreement may not necessarily come before the site plan. It might, at the earliest, I would say, would come with the site plan
Right.
when it comes to you.
But basically the same time? Okay.
Well, that requires a good estimate to come from engineers. So,
And I would assume that it's going to require to go to their board as well.
they're gonna have to deal with that too, right?
Ideally, we would prefer to have it before the plat actually gets filed at the county. That's kind of a normal time frame to get something like that in on a development like this.
You don't have to file the plat immediately. We've
That's
approved
correct.
it tonight, but
Yeah, and in this case, it's a public property, so there's not going to be any tax certificates, but it would just be something we'd want to do before we actually get the plat filed at the county. And it's also, something we want to do before we get too deep into the permitting process.
all right. All right, we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, show your hands. All opposed, same sign. It is unanimous. Council, before we adjourn, does anyone want to have an executive session? No? All right. Let me just, so that everybody's updated on this, one of the things, obviously, that the MUD is wanting is to get to work as soon as possible. In most cases, building permits would not have been issued until after site plan approval. Site plan by P&Z is scheduled for October 1. Is that right?
That's correct.
And our next council meeting would be the 13th, if we don't have a special meeting. So council, what I'm hearing from staff is that there are a number of items that they very soon could be ready to issue permits. Is that true, Pat? And so the applicant could sit down with you and try to work through what things can go ahead and get issued as soon as possible so they can begin to schedule their work. And does anyone on council feel like, or does staff recommend that we have a special council meeting to approve the site plan if it's not really required prior to some of the permitting happening? Site plan, my understanding, is sufficient to be sent out to P&Z, is that right?
That's correct. It's being sent as we speak.
Okay. So the new P&Z board will have the site plan. They will consider that on the 1st. And does council see any reason to have a special meeting to approve site plan, or just do it on the 13th if they can start to work?
As long as they're guaranteed they can start to work before then, I don't see a need, but if they're not, we should hold a meeting.
Okay. So,
I don't mind holding a meeting. I mean, if they're this short, if we got to stay till midnight, then maybe.
okay. All right, so what I'm hearing is council is okay with having a special council meeting?
Well,
We had tentatively said the 6th, is that what we had said?
all of those days, if you guys will recall, when we were talking about setting the date for the town hall meeting regarding the
that's
town
on the
hall,
yeah.
I was the one guy who can't do anything anywhere anytime for like 10 days. So don't let that stop y'all, but I probably, whatever meeting we have before the 13th, if we have one, I probably can't be there.
All right, so what is that, you're right, the town hall meeting's the 6th, isn't it?
It's the 8th.
The 8th? Okay.
Right.
I actually could do the 6th, but that's the National Night Out, which was the
Oh,
concern.
that was the
But
conflict.
if it's going to be an abbreviated agenda, that might not be an issue.
Can you do it after the
Well,
town
but it's
hall?
gonna be site plan, I don't know.
That's true. Could go, yeah.
Is there any
Also
reason
need
why
to have
October
the-
1st
We
wouldn't
need
work
to have this
after
other
P&Z?
agreement finished and ready for council at
Which
that
could
point
take
as
a
well.
long time, yeah.
So
All right.
we need to make
Jim?
sure
So
we're
we'll
good on that.
discuss.
Mr.
having a
Mayor, is
special-
there any reason why October 1st wouldn't work following P&Z's review on the 30th?
Just because what Patricia said is she wants the other agreement done by then.
And we would have needed to post that agenda
We would have had to already post.
30 minutes ago.
Since,
if we did it.
since we're meeting on the 8th of the town hall, we could hold it after the town hall?
For the 1st.
Potentially, we could do it then. And you're gone for the
We'd have
8th,
7
or how about you,
Yes, sir.
Garrett?
2, 3.
Right now, I'm here for
Okay.
the 8th. There's a good chance
You won't be.
No, you wouldn't, would you?
that still gives you a quorum with everybody else.
Okay. All right, so we'll just defer the setting of that till we can see exactly what we need to do to get that done. and anything else, council, that we need. So let me also open the floor to the applicant. Anything that you have questions, Adam or Jennifer or Keevan,
Would you have the agreement then?
anything you need? I know it's the last minute me ask you the question, anything
But
you
I
need.
do want to say thank you for approving the final plat.
All right. Anybody else? I never asked for citizens' comments. Did anybody in the citizen want to make a comment at this point? We voted on most things. I apologize, I didn't give you a chance.
Can I just ask a question since the applicant is here and the MUD directors are here? If we were to go ahead without a special session and everything goes forward and the P&Z receives your site plan, is there anything based on what you've heard tonight, do you think, that would keep you from taking action on breadwinners and Meet You Anywhere?
I'm gonna stop that. That's out of order at this point.
Okay.
So that's a separate issue, and that's not on the agenda. All right, any other discussion? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Jump the gun.
I'll
Second.
second.
Rowe moves and seconded by Lamont. All in favor, show your hands. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 26 minutes after 7.